The question is that this House do now adjourn. Gareth Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Epidermolysis bullosa is dreadful. It's often referred to as butterfly skin. It's a little-known, rare genetic skin blistering condition which causes skin to blister and tear at the slightest touch. EB, I'll be kind to myself for the rest of the speech and refer to it as EB, causes excruciating, lifelong pain and can have a devastating impact on the physical and mental well-being of patients. It can also greatly affect patients' families because of the constant treatment needed. In many cases, this means several hours of bandaging and unbandaging the most affected parts of the body on a daily basis. In its most severe form, EB also affects internal organs and eyes and causes severe problems when it comes to eating and drinking, and it requires extensive health care. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is no cure. It's believed that EB affects around 5,000 people in the UK, although there is limited information available from the NHS. Now, although this is a relatively small number, the severity of the condition is such that it has a deep impact. I was asked to secure this adjournment debate tonight by some of my constituents and by DEBRA, which is a UK-wide charity supporting people with EB and their caregivers, healthcare professionals and researchers who work with EB. The charity exists to improve the quality of life of people living with EB and to fund pioneering research to find effective treatments. The charity works in partnership with the NHS to deliver EB healthcare services. There are 4 centres of excellence delivering specialist care in the UK, along with additional hospital care and clinics at other locations. The charity has a proud record of funding EB research in the UK and internationally funding the first clinical trials in gene therapy. Its current focus is on fulfilling its mission to help people with EB live a life free of pain, a point which I'll refer to later in my speech. Now, many colleagues may be familiar with DEBRA from some of its network of more than 100 charity shops, which are the main source of the charity's income. I myself was able to visit one of the DEBRA shops located in Loxbottom in my Orpington constituency a few months ago. And I met not only the volunteers there, but also a local constituent called Wendy, who suffers with EB. Now, this particular lady has been suffering from EB since birth, and she told me of both of her experience and also of others who have an even more severe type of the condition. As a child, and even as a young lady, Wendy did not know that she had EB because doctors had not diagnosed the condition, which particularly in the early years is difficult to spot. She did, however, suffer constantly from blisters on her feet and her legs, and Wendy told me about how, while she was growing up in constant pain, she would try to hide her wounds from friends and classmates and would avoid wearing skirts in order to avoid causing unpleasant reactions from others. Yet, as terrible as this sounds, Wendy told me that her case was not uncommon and not as severe as it was for other patients. Very happy to give way.
Can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Orpington for bringing this forward? He brings forward an issue that affects his constituents but also affects mine and others across Northern Ireland, so I commend them for that. Does the Honourable Member not agree that this dreadful disease, named the butterfly disease because it's unusual, has the capacity to limit life and quality of life, and the funding for those treatments that the Honourable Gentleman has referred to that can provide relief to constituents and all of our constituencies, and his and mine and others in this House, is vital? And would the Honourable Member urge the Minister, who's a very compassionate man and understands the issue very, very well, to give even the smallest bit of funding towards the research to try and find a cure for the disease and to help the lives of those who have this?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Gentleman, the Member for Strangford, for his intervention, the kind words and the way that he expressed it. I agree entirely with the sentiments that he has expressed, and without giving out too many spoilers at this stage of my speech, there is a request coming in terms of a small amount of funding that will be requested towards the end. What I learned during the visit I've just referred to, Madam Deputy Speaker, was truly moving, and I'm particularly grateful to have met Wendy, but I'd also like to thank DEBRA's Director of Research, Dr. Sager Hussain, and all the excellent staff at the charity shop in my constituency for inviting me to visit them and learn more about how they help individuals who live with this painful condition. And I in the spirit of thanking people, I would also like to thank the Minister for his interest in this subject and for being here this evening to respond to the debate. I would also like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Faversham and Mid-Kent, for recently answering a written parliamentary question I had tabled about EB. But what I wanted to speak about this evening, to stress the fact that we cannot merely wait for a cure for the condition. We need to make a difference for patients who are suffering today and for those who will be living with the condition for the foreseeable future. All EB patients are crying out for better therapeutic treatments, which have the potential to vastly improve their lives. DEBRA has set themselves an objective of securing 2 to 3 treatments from drugs that are already licensed for other conditions to radically improve the quality of life experienced by people with EB. Now, in reply to my written question, my honourable friend, the member for Faversham and Mid-Kent, said that medicines that are potential candidates for repurposing in this way should be put forward for consideration for support from the Medicines Repurposing Programme, and I'm grateful for her guidance and can report that officials from the MRP have been in touch with DEBRA since I wrote to her to talk about the programme's work. Now, this is excellent news. In addition, I was delighted to hear that some innovative treatments for EB are either in trials or are being considered by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE for short. Specifically, NHS England is working with NICE on the evaluation of 2 products for EB. Birch bark extract for skin wounds and a gene therapy with a name that I'm going to find particularly difficult to pronounce, but I'm going to give it a shot. Berimagene G-Pavec. Now, I've almost certainly mispronounced that, but it is still very encouraging news. However, my understanding is that these 2 treatments will only be available for a fraction of the total number of people suffering from EB. And that's why repurposing process for more mainstream therapeutics is so important. And DEBRA has identified 6 anti-inflammatory drugs that could help with EB. Several of these drugs are already available for people with more common skin conditions such as eczema or psoriasis. For people with EB, they could be nothing short of life-changing. They have the potential to transform thousands of lives by improving wound healing, by reducing pain, and by lowering the burden on the family members and carers of those with EB. Will you give way? Happily give way.
Does he not agree that the problem with skin conditions, and particularly rare skin conditions, is that people are also embarrassed and also want to hide it, as he has pointed out before, which sort of adds really insult to injury?
Yes, I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and I do agree with that. And certainly the lady that I met, Wendy, that I met in the shop, that was very much her story, and she was not alone in that. Particularly when people are young and they have EB, but the doctors are unable to diagnose it at that stage. They don't know why they've got open and weeping sores. These things sometimes attract a smell as well. And as a result of that, they are ashamed of their condition. And it has a very bad social stigma and very bad for their sense of self-morale. So I'd like to thank her for her intervention at this stage. There would also be a very significant economic benefit too. For example, research by an expert dermatology professor at King's College London found that when used for EB, one of the drugs has been reported to reduce daily bandaging time from 3 hours to 1 by reducing the severity of the wounds and to reduce skin itch by 60%. This, in turn, would save time and money for the NHS and reduce the stress on the family unit supporting the patient. Studies by the London School of Economics in 2016 and 2022 reported that EB has a wider economic impact, as parents and family members are currently obliged to reduce their labour market participation due to the informal care of their loved one. The same study also revealed a higher prevalence of psychological and psychiatric symptoms among those with EB, very much along the lines of the Honourable Lady's point just a moment ago, indicating a further tranche of support costs, which could be reduced if treatments were improved. The most recent LSE study, published in September 2022, said that the annual cost per patient for somebody with dystrophic EB, which is the most severe form of the condition, is around £45,800, depending on their level of disability. And that takes into account direct and indirect costs for patients and caregivers. So the benefits are hugely significant. But to enter into the MRP process, the treatments in question will need to go through research trials to prove their efficacy in treating EB. To pay for this, DEBRA is seeking just £10 million from the DHSC, the NHS and the devolved administrations to go with a further £5 million from their own fundraising campaign. This relatively small amount of money would do so much to address the misery caused by this awful condition. I will give way.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know a little bit about EB. The headquarters for DEBRA is based in Bracknell. I have visited them on a number of occasions and their work is incredible. I'm full of admiration for what they do. Having come across people suffering from EB, which is a terrible, dreadful, debilitating disease, I can say with complete authority that the money that we're asking for today is an absolute drop in the ocean in terms of the overall budget that the UK has for health. And my point to the Minister is to say to him that actually what we need to be doing is throwing the kitchen sink at this. What we need to be doing is making sure that we can do what we can to repurpose these drugs to give these sufferers, these patients, these fantastic people better quality of life. And I would urge the Minister please to do whatever he can to make sure that actually 10 million quid is just a start. Does my honourable friend agree that we do indeed need to do everything possible for these sufferers?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm extremely grateful to my honourable friend for his intervention and also for the fact that he will be hosting a reception for EB and for DEBRA here, I believe it's in June.
The 19th of June. On
the 19th of June, you heard it here first, which I will attend, and I very much hope that other honourable members will join us down in the Terrace Pavilion. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I conclude my remarks this evening, I have three requests of the Minister. Firstly, will he agree in principle to the government supporting this request for funding? Secondly, I also understand that the MRP process tends to focus on generic drugs, but most of these treatments identified as candidates by DEBRA are not generics. So my second request of the Minister is, will he confirm that the MRP will consider non-generic drugs for potential use to treat EB? And I have a list for him in case he needs to see it. Finally, will the Minister agree to meet with me and representatives of DEBRA to discuss